Alrighty, so I posted this ship on Reddit. It's the Battlecruiser from Star Craft, and some folks asked for instructions, and I felt like it was easier to just make a video. Since that post, I've made a few improvements to make it a little bit more accurate. The original StarCraft model had this sort of slope right here on the wing, so I used these Stroud brand shroud pieces. So let's open the builder so we can kind of go over all the different little parts. Alright, so this actually starts out as the Stronghold ship, which you buy from Hope Tech. So if you go to the little Ron Hope's little ship store there, you can buy the Stronghold, which is pretty much the back half from here. From like here to here, like where the landing gears are, this whole bottom part, the middle part without these reverse thrusters, there's some different engines on the back. There's a different setup up here. I'll go into why I made changes like this. And so the structure is kind of already done. It already has like a big long middle part here, and then there's some big fat fuel tanks, and it's kind of ugly, but when I saw it, it was vaguely this shape, and I was like, oh, I can build a Battlecruiser, because it even already had these kind of landing gears just in a different spot, and they reminded me of those little nubs that stick off the neck in the middle of the Battlecruiser. So these are the NG-15 landing gears. By default, it comes with ones that have reverse thrusters, and then those get in the way, so you can't have three objects to match the three nubs that are on the Battlecruiser. So I traded them out for regular ones, and then I put reverse thrusters here and here instead. Mostly for aesthetic purposes. Reverse thrust doesn't really do all that much. The maneuverability isn't very high, but the firepower is such that, everything melts before you have to worry about going backwards. So by default, there's a docking collar here on that ship. I got rid of that and put a little hatch, because once you add these pieces and extend out the landing gear to make it more battlecruisery, that side docking hatch isn't super useful anymore, and you get the error that it's not the farthest piece out from the ship. So I put this docking collar instead. So the working pieces for guns, we have these Class C railguns. We have three of them. So there's one in the middle, just like the Yamato cannon is in the middle of the Battlecruiser. But they also have two more on the weapon pylons. And then I use these particle cannons. I like them. They do a lot of hull and shield damage, super useful in a fight. These pretty much don't do anything to the shields, but the particle cannons melt the shields quickly. And then when you start hitting hull, everything's doing 40-something damage, so it's good setup. It already has a lot of these metal pieces here, but what I did was, by default, there's another one of these guys over here. It's not super aesthetically pleasing, so I got rid of it and put in another Hope Tech pipes, and moved all these landing gears forward, and then for my third, bump, instead of using another set of these, because I wanted to have some cargo, so the ship's actually useful, and I took some poetic license, and the third bump is just the cargo boxes. So underneath here, we've got the Acculanders. These are kind of already here when you buy the Stronghold ship. You just kind of move them around to fit where you need them. Your entrance to the ship is also already here by default. It's the Stability Pro landing bay. So you just kind of got to leave it there. The biggest modification that I did was the engines and the grav drive and the reactor. So there's a lot of parts in here that you kind of have to get rid of and size down and reorient so that you can squeeze the big old reactor and grav drive inside the ship to make it more nice to look at. Then on the back, you can, in order to use the maximum number of engine pips, you see I have every engine pip utilized. It's 3 of these supernovas, which looks like how the battlecruiser looks, right? And then I snuck this little guy down here to use the last 3 and bump that maneuverability up. The deep diffuser reactor is this one. It's Class C. The grav drive is the SGD 3300. I'm pretty sure it's already on this ship. I just took it from the back and moved it forward. Now, in the middle here, there's actually one of those great big Hope Tech, like giant square 2x2 cargo rooms that doesn't actually hold any cargo. I got rid of that. It was more useful to me to have the captain's quarter, so you have a bed that you can jump into to heal after a mission, and a living quarter, because you increase your number of passengers. And then we have this control station that's already in here. Don't get rid of that, because that's what gives you the bulk of your crew capacity. So everything behind that, though, is kind of subject to your preference. So I've got a storeroom here because I needed a 1x1 thing. Companionway here, mostly because the way that they had this by default with this little tube here coming from this guy, you end up going up a bunch of ladders, and most of these rooms become kind of useless. But I wanted the kind of rounded corner shape instead of all angles like this. So these rooms are kind of superfluous. Behind the captain's quarter, there's like a superfluous room that just fills a space. It's this little storeroom. It's just there to make this bumper sit out proud instead of being inset, so that you have that nice kind of continuous shape. These are the Stroud caps to give that like angle-y bit that's there in the original model. I want to replace this cockpit with like that big flat wide one. I just haven't found it in the game yet. But for now, it's the Magellan. I just kind of like the slightly angular shape on the nose. The other one, the original one that's on here, is a little bit longer, and it sits proud of this position. And I wasn't super about it. This shield, this 1800 shield, this comes on that ship, the Stronghold. The rest of this is pretty much just greebling. Like, I went and this was already here, and this was a docker port, so I just kind of got rid of that docker port for my wing and mimicked what was on the other side. So when you're in the middle room there, you can kind of go out and look out the windows. It doesn't really have anything to do with the original design of the ship. It just sort of, in your imagination, it kind of creates a smoother transition from this point to this point. Because if you got rid of this, you have that big stupid hole there. So I opted to keep it for aesthetic purposes. Threw some radiators on there just for decoration. Some more here. These are the Demos pieces and more Hope Tech pipes. These are Demos reverse thrusters. These bumpers come on the Stronghold already, just in a different position, so you can kind of reuse them to give yourself that, again, like that sort of nice shape that matches the original model. Again, a little poetic license, a little imagination to see it, but I feel like that's the case no matter what you try to build from another franchise with Starfield parts. These are portholes. They're in the structural category. This is also in the structural category. This is also in the structural category. These are in the structural category. These are pretty much most of the stuff is structural category parts, except for the habs. the weapons, obviously the reactors and whatnot. But yeah, it's pretty simple. So for gas tanks, I tucked these guys on here because I felt like they looked the best, and without being a big blob circle or oval just chilling on the ship. This is the Hope Tech nose. So a lot of these parts you're going to get from planets that have Hope Tech ships to sell. The Deimos hulls, I just kind of like them. You don't really super have to use them. It's just that's what I had available where I was when I started doing this. It might be better to use Stroud parts all over. I just don't super feel like redoing it. These, though, are Deimos parts to make this part correctly, and those, I mean, in my opinion, you super need those. The rest of the Deimos parts, I suppose you could use whatever hull pieces you like. But yeah, then down here is just another living quarters. I got to one point in the mission where, like, Sarah was on my ship, Samco was on my ship, Samco's daughter was on my ship. That guy that you rescue when you also are trying to rescue Barrett was on the ship. So, like, having a lot of those passenger positions was super useful. Otherwise, they'd all kind of just be crowded in here, standing around in the cockpit anyway. And then these are Caravel cargoes. So, in the end, you get 1,600 shields, 1,320 cargo. You can have 6 crew. You can do a 30 light year jump. Mobility's pretty good, and everything melts to the absolute firepower. Missiles are not required. you can put them on, but you're gonna have to drop engine or shield power to have missiles, because I'll show you when we exit out of this and get on the ship.
Would be a nice touch.
Oh, there you are. Now, it is a bit of a maze, so what I typically do is cheat and just go press R. There it is. Go right to the cockpit. So if we take off...
And we're off. Smooth as glass.
Sarah? I mean, look at that. How cool is that?
We're locking into orbit now.
Alright, so, with the power set the way it is here, your shields are at 75% capacity. Now, it's 1,600 hit point shield, right? So, what is that? That's still 1,200 shields, right? So, your next largest shield generator is only like 900. So leaving it at 75, you still have some of the strongest shields that you can get. But now with this many pips into your 2 weapons, they still take a second to cycle for the particle cannons, and I feel like that's probably like 8 or 9/10 of a second for the railguns. So if you wanted to take some of that power away to give the missiles, which also reload very slowly to begin with, you're not going to be hitting things very often. You know what I mean? Because you're going to be constantly waiting for your guns to recycle. So then you say, alright, well, maybe we'll take some power out of engines, but we're already not hitting 100 here. That one last pip is... I just kind of leave that there so that when I go to grab jump, it just automatically does it. But if you don't hear it like that, you can kind of throw it in there. You're still only going to do 106, 107, unless you boost. So it's not the fastest thing out there, but it is the Star Craftiest thing out there. So yeah, that's the ship.